Wyscout has normal mode. What's your favourite mode?
Don't know. Goblin mode.
Chelsea drew with Arsenal. Chelsea drew with Arsenal. We're going to talk about how good Chelsea are now because we both think Chelsea are good, don't we, John?
Yes, I think so.
Yes. Now, can you show me, on this board, what we have is Chelsea lined up in a 4-4-2 versus Arsenal. But some people might say, did Chelsea play a 4-4-2? I don't, do they?
Well, out of possession, they certainly did against Arsenal. And I thought their out of possession play was absolutely fantastic. We can talk a little bit about the in possession play in a bit. But I think the out of possession side of the game for Chelsea was what really allowed them to control the game. And I think they did that in a specific way because I think so much of what Arsenal are good at in terms of build-up is having all of these rotations where they can move players around, and it gives you a structure to build out from, but it also can pull opponents around. And so the way that Chelsea were approaching that out of possession was designed to stop that from really happening. Do you want me to carry on?
I would like you to carry on, please, yes.
So I think the tendency for most...
Because they're not strikers.
No, these aren't strikers. We've got Conor Gallagher and Cole Palmer as the front line of this attack. And I think the reason why Pochettino's picked these two players is because they're both very intelligent readers of the game, but also very mobile as well, so they can move quite well in terms of the out of possession, put players under pressure. Now, these two are going to sit here as the front line of this press, but I think most opponents who come up against Arsenal will have quite a man-oriented approach to pressing, and what that means is that if you have loads of rotations like Arsenal do, then it can pull your structure around. So Arsenal, as we know, often you'll see the fullback inverting coming inside, so we'll see Zinchenko in the middle, but they also have the opportunity to drop Declan Rice, who's playing as an 8 in this game. There's times when Martinelli ends up in the middle forming a double pivot. Erdogan can drop in, even Jesus can drop in as well at times. And so the whole idea behind that is to pull opponents around, destabilise their out of possession approach and cause space that you can then attack. But what Pochettino was doing is he was saying, I'm not going to do any of that. What we're going to have is we're going to have a zonal system largely. It's still going to be man orientated to a certain degree. So if a player comes into your zone, you're going to move on to them, make sure there's no easy option for them. But if your player in your zone moves out of your zone, you don't necessarily track them, follow them. So you might call this an option-oriented zonal marking system. So what we have is Chelsea pushing all the way up here. And the beauty of this is, as we've said, there's so many options for the ways that you can form a double pivot here. You can have Zinchenko coming in, you can have Rice coming in. Sometimes Martinelli drops in certain situations, etc., etc. But that isn't going to change the structure of Chelsea's press. They're always going to have the two players on the front line here, making sure that Arsenal can't build through the middle. And that forces them into wide areas. Now, the solution, I think, to that kind of approach is that you should try and overload, right? You should try and have more players than the opposition have. So let's say Zinchenko comes inside and then you also bring in, let's say, Rice here. Now you have a problem. But the way that you're going to see this solved by Chelsea is by players from the line behind just stepping up and making sure that overload doesn't become a problem. And we saw those sorts of jumps happening a lot, particularly on this side of the field. So you have Enzo Fernandez often tracking Erdogan deeper. And you also saw actually Colwill as the line behind Enzo then stepping up in case there are any problems here. And this just caused huge amounts of problems for the Arsenal build-up, and it just ended up forcing them into wide areas. But then in the wide areas, you had a huge amount of aggression, particularly on this side. Saka, dangerous player for Arsenal. Cucurella, very aggressive, stepping up onto him, not allowing him any space, and just being super physical with him to make sure that Arsenal couldn't just then progress the ball in those wide areas. And this was such a big problem for Arsenal that they actually did change up their build-up structure a little bit as well. So obviously with Saka being pretty much shackled by Cucurella, what Arteta did is he moved him inside to move him away from Cucurella. And what this then ended up doing was allowing a channel for Ben White to push forward onto Cucurella like this, and that means Jorginho can move out into the wide area. But then the beauty of this option-oriented zonal marking system is you don't really need to change too much. So we've got Zinchenko coming inside to form a single pivot in this instance. You've got a situational back three with Jorginho on the outside, and all that we really saw happening was then Sterling would step up a little bit more just to keep Gabriel a little bit less free. And then Mudryk moved inside to make sure the option to Saka wasn't there, so he sits a little bit deeper. And yeah, if the ball comes out to Jorginho, then there's no way for him to really go other than playing the ball into a 1v1 Ben White versus Cucurella. Mudryk's keeping this line closed, and again, we're not losing that structure. Chelsea is staying roughly in a 4-4-2 system. And is that the bell to tell me I've been speaking too long?
No, I accidentally hit my coffee. I drank an entire cafetiere to myself today. What about Chelsea in possession?
Chelsea in possession, I thought were really interesting because they did something that we've not really seen many teams try against Arsenal, and that is that they...
Well, make it so we've got on Arsenal, right? I want to make it slightly wider. Just one thing I noticed about this game particularly is that what you see often is that Palmer and Gallagher are playing through the middle, like we say, out of possession near the front two. But we also see is them basically playing through the middle as the deeper players. So the highest players forward are often like Sterling or Mudryk. At times it was actually Enzo swapping with Mudryk out here, and one of them would be through the middle and he'd drop in like that. So if a Gallagher drops in, Enzo can go out, right? But let's say it's like this. Now again, this sort of goes against the rules of football that I like to think of, where you should have the central point should be the highest forward because that pushes the line back. If you're wide like this, then you're leaving, it's like the false nine kind of thing, you're leaving these players alone in the middle. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Isn't this what Brighton do? Brighton play with their front line abandoning the...
What am I going over here? Yeah. So like, do you know what I mean? Because again, like, if you're playing five-a-side and you have the widest players or on the wings, it just absolutely does you in because then everyone squeezes up and you've not got a central point out. So then all that happens is the ball goes out to this wide player, they get tight, the ball has to go backwards. But yet Chelsea were attacking and these guys were the most dangerous players every single attack by doing that sort of thing. They're playing as it's almost like they're both number 10s and also 8s, but also 9s.
Well, I think what Chelsea were trying to do is they were trying to bait Arsenal forward because we know Arsenal have a really aggressive...
Because everyone does this now,
press. Yeah, everyone does it. But I think that what they knew is that they could move the ball into one area, and that's essentially a trigger for Arsenal to go really aggressive and really high. They end up going something like this, and they squeeze across to the side, around the ball. They're trying to win the ball back. And I thought what Chelsea were really good at doing is they tried to play really direct. So they would either go straight over the top of the press if they were worried about having too much pressure around the ball carrier.
Yes.
But what they were also doing is they were actually doing really quick one-touch passing. So they're moving the ball out into the wide areas, and then they were trying to find these sort of diagonal attacking movements. So they would have players positioned along this diagonal.
They do this a lot, right? They have players that play along like a diagonal line.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so what we were seeing then, I think the reason for that is because Arsenal squeeze across, they were then looking to find usually like Enzo in this kind of position to play the ball into free space, and then you're running at the Arsenal back line, right?
It's like rugby.
Yeah. Yeah, so because we know that Arsenal are going to overload in that wide area, then try and move the ball through the press quickly, but try and move it on the diagonal. So it seemed as though what Chelsea have been working on are these sorts of plays where they can move the ball quickly in that diagonal line in order to then expose the back line on the opposite side of the field, because then there should be a lot more space over on that side.
So what else are Chelsea good at? So we think Chelsea are good now, right? So early in the season they had some bad results. They've had a really bad injury list. The injury list includes all of the players, but players like Fofana, Disasi, James came in as a sub though, maybe back, Ben Chilwell, Badiashile, Lavia, not even started it or even played the game yet, has he? Broja, Mudryk's been injured for a little bit as well. So I think it was this season, maybe last season, doesn't matter. They've had lots of injury problems, but the team's starting to come together now, but the underlying numbers show that they are actually decent, right? Because what are they for underlying numbers, John? What have we got?
Well, in terms of the expected goals, they're sort of around mid-table. So I suppose there are questions.
3, 4, 5, 6 for expected goals.
There's questions about whether or not they're the most dangerous attacking team, and they've had finishing problems as well, right?
Well, that's it.
Combination of
those
those
XG of 16.3 and actual goals of 13. So had they been taking their chances, or like most good teams do, scoring slightly over your XG, like Arsenal, Man City always do this, score over their XG. Chelsea have been scoring under, which we know is linked a lot to but I guess unfairly. Is it unfair to say Nicholas Jackson should have scored more goals? He's one of the ones.
Should, yeah. I think is it Nicholas Jackson and there's someone else who've underperformed their expected goals by about 2 or something like that. So
I'll find it while you tell me what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's definitely an issue, and I suppose the question for me, obviously the expected goals against are a lot more healthy, and if you look at expected points, Chelsea actually look quite good. I had a look at Understat this morning, and their model has them, around top 4. So they're putting up decent underlying numbers. But I suppose the question I would have is, what we've seen here is Chelsea looking really good against Arsenal, a team where they're going to be the antagonists, right? It's a match where they're going to be spending a lot of time doing, a lot of defending, a lot of aggressive defending, and then trying to hit on the break to an extent. And they've looked really good in this game. My question is going to be, against some of the smaller teams, are Arsenal Are Chelsea looking as dangerous as they could do? Is that where they're going to be let down this season? Are they going to have problems if teams start sitting deep against them and they have to break down a low block? But again, the underlying numbers are still pretty good, and they're
really good. The players who've missed are Enzo Fernandez, he's under his XG, but that was a penalty that he missed, I think. And Ben Chilwell, who missed that 1v1 when he was through on goal. He's not even on the team here, but yeah.
I think that there's certainly signs that they're going to be a much tougher prospect for top 6 teams to face. The big question is going to be how they overcome their finishing against some of the smaller teams. They'll be looking forward to the return of Nkunku.
Christopher Nkunku.
Yeah, he'll solve a lot of problems, I think, for them in terms of being a dangerous.
Well, they were building a team around to get him in pre-season before he got all injured. That's a shame.
Yeah, and it does sort of raise questions about what they're going to be doing once he's back, because they do seem to have found a system that works for them right now.
Do you play him as a 9, do you think?
Yeah, I think. Well, the big question is: do you play him as a 9 or do you play him behind the striker? In which case, you're going to have to drop one of Enzo, Gallagher, and Caicedo, which is, I think at the moment the way that midfield is working is good enough that you probably don't want to change that up. But I suspect that you'll put Nkunku as the striker, and then you've got loads of options. So imagine this is Nkunku. You've got loads of options then to come in the wide areas, and it's starting to look like a pretty solid team.
Well, that sounds good to me. The last thing we should do, because I know you really like word association, is do word association. So this is Jon Mackenzie's word association. Stamford Bridge.
Chelsea.
Didier Drogba.
Chelsea.
Frank Leboeuf.
Chelsea.
Celestine Babayaro.
Chelsea.
Dan Petrescu.
Chelsea.
Offside.
No, Chelsea.
Kevin Gallagher.
Chelsea.
Conor Gallagher.
Chelsea.
Liam Gallagher.
Chelsea.
Noel Gallagher.
Chelsea.
Jon Mackenzie.
Chelsea.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.